My name is Claire Thompson. I'm 31 years old. On paper, my life looks fine. I live alone in a small apartment in Chicago, work as a public relations executive, and handle campaigns worth millions of dollars. People at the office think I have it all together. But on the night of my birthday, I sat in silence, staring at a slice of carrot cake I had bought for myself. I lit one candle and whispered, "Happy birthday, Claire." My voice sounded hollow in the stillness. The phone on the couch beside me remained dark. No calls, no texts, nothing from my family. I told myself I shouldn't care. Birthdays are for kids, but there's something about being forgotten by your own parents that stings, no matter how old you get. Out of habit, I opened Facebook. What I saw stopped me cold. My younger brother Daniel stood in the center of a brightly lit room, champagne glass raised. A banner above him read, "Congratulations on your promotion." My parents were there, beaming with pride. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all gathered to celebrate. The photos were posted just a few hours earlier. On my birthday, every picture was like a small cut. Smiling faces, raised glasses, a family gathered in joy, while I sat alone with a store-bought slice of cake. It wasn't that they forgot. They had made a choice. And it wasn't the first time. Memories crowded in. At 11, I waited alone at a restaurant with a melting candle, while my family rushed to Daniel's debate competition. At 17, I was sent to my grandmother's for the weekend so my parents could tour Yale with him. Even my college graduation dinner had been hijacked by Daniel's engagement announcement. The pattern was always the same. Daniel's life mattered. Mine was something to fit in around his. I remembered a night years ago when I asked my father why no one had shown up for an award ceremony where I was honored. He didn't even flinch before giving me an answer I'd never forget. "Claire, don't make this about you. In this family, we celebrate the child who makes us proud." Those words echoed in my mind as I stared at my phone screen, at the smiling faces that excluded me once again. It wasn't neglect. It wasn't forgetfulness. It was preference. A preference that had defined my entire life. That night, something shifted inside me. For 31 years, I had waited for recognition that never came. As the candle burned low, I felt the first stirrings of a decision. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for their approval and start building a life where I didn't need it. That night, as the candle flickered down to nothing, I told myself it was time to let the day go. 31 wasn't special anyway, but sleep didn't come easily. The memory of my father's words, "We celebrate the child who makes us proud," kept circling back, hitting harder now that I had proof it was still true. The next morning, I dressed for work and tried to bury myself in routine, but when I opened my laptop at the office, an email notification popped up that made my breath catch. My annual performance bonus had cleared, $82,000. For a moment, pride warmed my chest. That money wasn't luck. It was the result of months of late nights, client calls, and carrying campaigns that kept our firm's reputation intact. It was mine. For once, something in my life was entirely mine. But that feeling didn't last. 2 days later, by accident, I was added to a family group chat. My mother must have mistyped, because suddenly the thread appeared on my phone, filled with names I hadn't seen in years. At first I thought maybe, just maybe, it was about me, that they were planning something belated. My fingers actually trembled as I scrolled. Then the words hit me like a slap. "Quinn should contribute significantly to Daniel's anniversary gift," my father wrote. "At least $20,000. Beneath it, my mother had replied, "She just got that big bonus." "Time she supports the family for once," I read it again, the phrase burning into me. Supports the family for once. My mind flashed through every memory. Me cooking Thanksgiving dinner alone in college, me wiring money to cover a car repair for my parents, me listening on the phone while my mother cried about bills I couldn't even fix. Hadn't I already been supporting them, emotionally and financially, my whole life? And still, to them, I was the selfish one. At the office, I must have gone pale because Jennifer, my colleague and closest friend, stopped by my desk. She has the kind of presence that grounds you instantly. Dark curls always pulled back, eyes sharp with concern. "Everything okay?" she asked. I turned my laptop so she could see the messages. Her jaw tightened as she read, "They expect you to hand over $20,000 for your brother's party?" I nodded, ashamed to admit how much it hurt. "Apparently, it's my turn to support the family." Jennifer leaned against my desk, arms crossed. "Claire, listen to me. That bonus is yours. You earned it. Don't you dare let them guilt you out of it." Her words were firm, but her eyes softened. "You've given them enough." That evening, I found myself knocking on Mrs. Bennett's door. Our Tuesday dinners had become something of a ritual, a safe harbor when the rest of the world felt unsteady. She ushered me in with her usual smile, setting down a plate of warm oatmeal cookies between us. I told her about the messages, the bonus, the expectation that I would simply hand it over. Her face clouded, the lines around her eyes deepening. "Some families," she said quietly, "forget that love isn't measured by money. They think in terms of what you can provide, not who you are." She placed her hand over mine, "But Claire, you don't owe them your future." Her words settled into me like stone foundations. For the first time, I allowed myself to wonder what it would feel like to stop giving, stop apologizing, stop trying to earn my place in a family that never intended to see me. Still, doubt gnawed at me. Guilt is a language you learn young, and it takes years to unlearn. But that night, as I stood on my balcony with the city stretching out before me, a different thought began to take root. What if I took this bonus and built something that belonged only to me? That thought was terrifying, and it was liberating. Because for once, I didn't want to be the daughter who stepped aside. I wanted to be the woman who claimed her own space in the world. The thought that I might finally choose myself instead of them stayed with me, steady as a drumbeat. But old habits don't break overnight. Guilt sat heavy on my chest, the way it always did when family was involved. For every ounce of anger, there was a voice in my head whispering, "What if they're right? What if you are selfish?" I tried to drown those voices in work. At least at Horizon PR, my effort counted for something. My campaigns had won clients, saved accounts, and built trust. People there saw me clearly. At least that's what I believed. Then came the moment that proved me wrong. It started with a knock on my office door. Jennifer poked her head in, her curls bouncing as she frowned. "Claire, I think you should see this," she said, handing me her tablet. On the screen was an email chain between Daniel and one of our biggest clients, Region Tech. My heart dropped as I read. Somehow Daniel had reached out directly, using my name and reputation to set up a meeting for his investment firm, without asking me, without even mentioning it. My fingers tightened around the tablet. "This is the third time," Jennifer whispered, her voice edged with disbelief. "He's been using your contacts, hasn't he?" I swallowed hard, remembering the times Daniel had casually asked for introductions. I'd brushed it off, thinking it was harmless. But now the truth was glaring. He was building his career off the trust I had spent years earning. And my parents, those same parents who called me selfish, were cheering him on as if none of it mattered. The betrayal cut deeper than the group chat. Money was one thing. But this was my name, my credibility, my life's work. My phone buzzed. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. With hands that trembled, I answered. "Hey, sis." His voice was smooth, casual, like he hadn't just hijacked my professional contacts. "I need a favor. Regan Tech's chief marketing officer. Could you make sure she's at my dinner tomorrow night? It's important. Family helping family, right?" For a moment, I couldn't find words. He said it so easily, as though my effort, my years of work, were just tools for him to borrow. I forced my voice steady. "I'll see what I can do." And then I hung up before the anger spilled out. Jennifer was still standing in my doorway. She crossed her arms, eyes fierce. "Claire, enough is enough. When do you stop giving them everything they ask for? When do you say no?" Her bluntness hit me like cold water. She was right. If I didn't draw the line here, I might never do it. That evening, I stopped by Mrs. Bennett's apartment. She was pulling a tray of cookies out of the oven, the scent of cinnamon filling the air. She set the plate down in front of me, studying my face. "You look troubled," she said gently. I told her everything, about the group chat, about Daniel's requests, about how my own parents had joined in the chorus that I should give and give until there was nothing left of me. Finally, I admitted the part that scared me most. Sometimes I wonder if I'm crazy for thinking this is unfair. Maybe I'm just weak for wanting more. Mrs. Bennet reached across the table, her weathered hand covering mine. Her voice was calm, steady. "Wanting to be valued isn't weakness, dear. It's the most natural thing in the world. The weakness is pretending you don't deserve it." Her words sank deep. For years I had carried the belief that I had to earn my family's love by proving myself useful. That night, I started to wonder, what if the proving was never going to be enough? What if they never intended to love me on any other terms? As I walked back upstairs to my apartment, the city felt different. The skyline glowed the same as always, but to me it seemed like a mirror, every light a reminder that people can shine even when they've been overlooked. I thought of Daniel, sliding into opportunities that weren't his, wearing my reputation like a borrowed suit. I thought of my father's voice in that group chat, demanding I support the family for once. And I realized something I had never allowed myself to believe before. They didn't want my love. They wanted my labor. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I was willing to give it anymore. The weight of truth settled heavy on my shoulders. My family didn't want my love, only my labor. For days, I carried that realization with me like an unwelcome guest. It followed me into the office, onto the train, into the quiet of my apartment. No matter how I tried to focus on work, guilt and anger fought inside me, each taking turns at the wheel. Then came the invitation I knew was inevitable. My mother's voice on the phone, sweet but firm. "Claire, we're having a family dinner this Saturday. Everyone will be there. It's time we cleared the air." Her words sounded less like an invitation and more like a summons. Still, something inside me stirred. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the need for release. But I agreed, and for the first time, I decided I wouldn't go empty-handed. On Friday night, I sat on my living room floor surrounded by boxes I hadn't opened in years, old journals, forgotten photographs, keepsakes from childhood. I pulled out 3 heavy photo albums and stacked them beside me. Each one told a story, stories my parents preferred to ignore. This time, I would make them look. Saturday evening, the Edwards house loomed ahead, its stone exterior lit by warm lanterns, the driveway lined with cars of relatives who never seemed to remember my birthday, but always found their way to Daniel's celebrations. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I stepped inside. The smell of beef Wellington filled the air, a dish my parents always claimed was my favorite. In truth, it hadn't been mine since high school. It was Daniel's favorite. The dining room gleamed with its usual perfection, polished silver, crystal glasses, candles flickering in sterling holders. My father sat at the head of the table, authority radiating from him as always. My mother flitted between dishes, ensuring everything looked impeccable. Daniel, glass of wine in hand, looked relaxed, confident, exactly like the man who had always been given center stage. Dinner began with the usual choreography, my father boasting about Daniel's firm, my mother adding polished anecdotes, relatives nodding along. I pushed food around my plate, waiting for the inevitable. It came with dessert. My father set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. "Claire," he said, his voice carrying the weight of expectation, "we need to discuss your contribution to Daniel and Jessica's anniversary celebration. $20,000 should cover the venue and catering. Considering your recent windfall, it's only fair." My mother nodded, pearl earrings swaying in the candlelight. "Family supports family, darling. You know that something inside me snapped into place, calm, steady." I pushed back my chair and stood. "I brought something," I said, walking to the sideboard where I had left the albums. I carried them back to the table and set them down with a soft thud that cut through the clinking of silverware. My father frowned. "What is this?" Evidence, I replied quietly. I opened the first album and turned it toward the table. Page after page of Daniel's birthdays filled the glossy sheets. Balloons, parties, gifts stacked high. My mother leaned closer, smiling reflexively. "Look at you at 8, Daniel," she murmured. I flipped to another page. His 16th birthday, a car wrapped in a bow, my father handing him the keys while my mother wept with joy. Laughter from relatives echoed in the photo, preserved smiles beaming from the background. Then I placed the second album on top, my album, sparse, almost barren. A picture of me at 11, alone at a diner table with a single candle melting into the frosting. A blurry shot of me at 20, holding a grocery store cupcake. One photograph of me with Mrs. Bennett on my 30th birthday, her arm wrapped around me in a hug that looked more like love than anything else I'd ever received from my family. My mother's smile faltered. "There was nothing to put in it," I explained softly, "because no one showed up." Silence pressed down on the table. Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. My father's face darkened. I opened the third album, Family Vacations, Disney World, the Grand Canyon, a European tour, smiling faces, matching shirts, endless memories captured in photographs. I wasn't in a single one. I turned a page slowly, deliberately. These were the years I was left with Grandma, or told there wasn't enough money for me to come along. My father slammed his hand against the table, rattling the silverware. "What is the point of this melodrama, Claire?" "The point," I said, my voice steady, "is that you've always made a choice. And it was never me." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they didn't move me. Her words came out in a whisper, trembling. "We didn't mean to. It just happened." I looked at her, my chest tight, but my voice calm. And then it became a pattern. And I became invisible. I slid a worn page from my journal across the table. "This is from when I was 9, I said. I read aloud, "Maybe next year they'll remember my birthday without Grandma reminding them." No one spoke. Finally, I pulled a photograph from my purse and placed it beside Daniel's wine glass. It was from Christmas dinner 3 years ago. A table set with fine china, every seat filled except one, mine. My parents had sent me the picture with a note that said, "We missed you," but the place card in front of the empty chair was labeled guest. I met their eyes one by one. Even when you pretended I belonged, I was still an outsider. Daniel's gaze dropped to the photograph. My mother's hand covered her mouth. My father's jaw clenched, his face turning crimson. "What do you want from us?" he demanded. "An apology? Fine. We favored Daniel. He was the achiever. He carried the Edwards name. That was our choice. And it worked. The words landed like stones. But instead of shattering me, they set me free. I stood taller, gathering the albums into my arms. "I don't need your apology. I don't need your love, your approval, or your validation. I waited 31 years to be seen. I'm done waiting." I walked to the door, my heels clicking across the hardwood. My mother called my name, her voice breaking. Daniel whispered, "Claire." My father stayed silent. At the threshold, I paused, not turning back. "Keep the albums," I said. "Consider them a gift." Then I closed the door behind me. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. The slam of the heavy door behind me still echoed in my ears as I walked down the steps of my parents' mansion. For 31 years, I had waited to be seen at that table, but as I slid into my car and started the engine, something shifted inside me. I no longer felt like the girl begging for recognition. I felt like a woman who had finally said enough. For the first time, silence didn't hurt. It healed. In the days that followed, I ignored the calls, the messages, the guilt-soaked voicemails my mother left each morning. At the office, I poured myself into work and found strength in the recognition I had always been denied at home. Lawrence, our CEO, congratulated me personally on the campaign that had boosted a client's revenue by 40%. Jennifer dropped by with her usual encouragement, telling me, "Claire, you saved that account." Don't let anyone make you feel small again. But it wasn't just about work anymore. Something inside me longed for a space that was truly mine, a sanctuary untouched by family obligations or memories of neglect. One evening, I opened my laptop and typed the words again. Lakefront property, Michigan. This time, I didn't just browse. I called a realtor, scheduled a visit, and within a week, I was standing on the deck of a modest 4-bedroom home, overlooking calm water that stretched like a promise. The house wasn't perfect, the siding needed paint, and the deck had boards that creaked underfoot, but it felt right. The realtor asked if I wanted to think about it, maybe bring family to see it. I shook my head. No, this one's for me. 2 weeks later, I signed the papers. My hands didn't tremble as I held the keys. Mrs. Bennett came with me to the closing, her gentle presence more comforting than words. Sometimes, she told me, patting my hand, you have to build your own family and your own home. I spent weekends making the place mine. I painted the bedroom a warm sage green, lined the living room shelves with books, and framed photos that told my story. My graduation, the campaign team celebrating with pizza after a big win, a snapshot of me and Jennifer laughing until our eyes watered. On the door of the master bedroom, I hung a small wooden sign that read, "Birthday Suite." It was silly, but it made me smile every time I passed by. When the house was ready, I hosted a gathering, not of relatives bound by blood, but of the people who had chosen me and whom I had chosen in return. Jennifer came with a bottle of wine and a crooked smile. Colleagues brought dishes to share. Mrs. Bennett arrived last, carrying a handmade quilt in shades of blue and green. "Every home needs something sewn with love," she said, laying it across my bed. That evening we ate on the deck, the sun painting the lake in hues of gold and rose. Laughter filled the air, not the polished performance of family dinners, but the genuine warmth of people glad simply to be together. I looked around at the faces glowing in the fading light, and for the first time in years, I felt celebrated, not for what I could give, but for who I was. As the stars appeared over the lake, I realized that the albums I had left behind weren't just evidence of what I had lost, they were proof of what I was no longer willing to accept, and here in this home of my own making, I was writing a new story, one where I wasn't invisible, one where I belonged to myself. A year later, the morning sun spilled across the deck of my lake house, painting the water in shades of silver and gold. My 32nd birthday had ended in silence, but my 32nd year had begun something new. And now, at 33, I was surrounded by laughter. Jennifer was in the kitchen arranging flowers, Mrs. Bennett was teaching one of my colleagues how to fold napkins properly, and the deck was alive with voices and the smell of grilled food. A cake sat waiting, this time with 33 candles, and I knew I wouldn't have to light them alone. As I watched the scene, my phone buzzed on the railing. Another string of missed calls from my parents. For once, I didn't feel the familiar sting. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and turned toward the people who had actually shown up. Later, as twilight settled over the lake, I sat on the dock with a glass of wine in my hand. The water was calm, reflecting the first stars of the evening, and I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the lonely birthdays, the empty albums, the dinner where I finally said no. I realized something simple, something I wish I had understood sooner. Love that has to be earned by sacrifice isn't love at all. Real family, whether born or chosen, doesn't demand your silence or your savings. It celebrates you for who you are, not for what you can provide. That truth had cost me years of doubt, but it had also given me this moment, the peace of a life where I no longer begged to be seen. I took a deep breath, the night air crisp against my skin, and made myself a quiet promise. I would never again measure my worth by someone else's preference. I would never again shrink to fit their definition of pride. And if you're listening to my story, maybe it's because a part of you understands what it feels like to be overlooked. If that's true, I hope you hear this. You are not invisible. You never were. Stories like this remind us why sharing matters, why we gather here, across generations, to listen, to reflect, to remind one another that we are not alone. If this touched you, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a comment, or share your own experience. Because sometimes telling your story is the first step toward reclaiming your power. As the last candle flickered out on my cake, I smiled. This year, I wasn't blowing out a wish for their approval. I was celebrating the gift I had finally given myself, the gift of choosing my own worth.